Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over 5 things that you want to avoid when you first get started with goats. I've had goats going on 4 years now, and when I first started it was definitely a learning process. So I have fallen victim to some of these same tips myself, so the goal in this video is to help save you guys some time and money and avoid these easy mistakes. Oh well, I think I got that first intro. So the first thing that you want to avoid is overcrowding. When I was first getting into goats and had an area fenced off and I was ready to start purchasing some goats, I was going and I was buying every goat that I could find. I'd buy 1 here, 3 here, 6 here, and I soon realized that I had way too many goats in my area. I had about 2.5 acres fenced in to begin with, and then I was already going ahead and fencing off another 1.5 acres, 2 acres I believe it was. So total I had about 5 acres available, but I had probably 15, 16 adult goats, which was too many, and then they started having babies. And I had way too many, so I had to start selling some off quickly. And looking back, I just got way too many, way too quickly. So what I'd recommend you do is start off with a few, see how they do. Because if you have 2 acres of just grass, that's a lot different than 2 acres of dense, thick woods as far as what they can eat. So just pay attention to what kind of area you have fenced in, whether that be pasture, a mixture of woods and pasture, or just thick, solid woods. So that's going to determine really how many goats you can have. So get a couple goats, put them out, leave them for a month or 2, see how much they eat. If they're putting a good dent in the vegetation, and then you know you're probably not going to be able to support many more goats. But if the vegetation is growing while the goats are eating it and they're not able to manage it, then you can get some more goats and put some more in there and help kind of equal it out. And that means you won't have to feed them any hay. But if it's the winter time and there's nothing green, obviously you're going to have to feed the goats hay. But you don't want to have to feed them hay in the spring, summer, or fall. You want them to be eating the vegetation. And when you have goats that are overcrowded, it starts to bring on a lot of health issues. So think of goats as a herd animal, which they are. They're going to go eat all together in the same spot. They're going to sleep all together in the same spot, and they're going to eventually poop all together in the same spots. And when you have a lot of goats, you have a lot of poop. And what's in goat poop are worms. And if you have a ton of goats on a small area, that poop's going to hit the ground. Those worms are going to start crawling up the grass, the plants, the vegetation, whatever they're eating, and they're going to eat more of that contains the worms, and you're going to have a very big worm problem. Start off slow. Unlike me, I learned the hard way. Start off slow, get a few goats, see how they do, see what you can handle, let them have enough room to spread out. So the second mistake that you want to avoid is do not over-medicate your goats. We just talked about worms and how they can devastate a goat herd and how they can quickly get out of control. But what you do not want to do is you do not want to over-medicate your goats. And what I mean by that is some people will worm their goats every month. And this is absolutely 100% wrong. You do not want to do that. Goats always have worms in their system. It just becomes a problem when they get overloaded and their body cannot fight off the worms naturally. So then you have to worm the goats. But some people think that you need to worm your goats every month so that you stay on top of the problem. If you give the wormer to the goats every month, month after month, those worms inside their stomachs are slowly going to build a resistance to that wormer. And then when they become resistant to it, then overpopulate the goat, and you give them that same wormer, it's not going to do a thing for the goat, and they're going to succumb to the worms and die. So what I recommend, and what I've been doing with great success for the past 2 or 3 years, is I only worm a goat when I see symptoms of an overload of worms in that goat. Diarrhea, skinniness, just overall loss of appetite, lethargic, just not acting like themselves. That's when I'll come in and I'll worm the goats. It's worked out almost 100%. I've only lost one goat to worms since I've had goats for probably about 4 years now. I have never wormed goats on a schedule. You just worm them when they need them. So I would highly recommend, do not worm your goats on a schedule. Just keep an eye on them, monitor them. You can check their FOMACHAs. There's tons of videos out there. We'll probably do one to show you how to check a goat's FOMACHA. It's super easy. But that's what I would highly recommend, is just keep an eye on your goats, let them fight the worms off with their own bodies and their own immune systems, and just step in when necessary. So the third thing that you want to avoid is be very cautious of the free goat that you see on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, or any type of online trading post. Be very cautious. So when people give away free goats, they're usually either sick, injured, or just all in all in terrible condition. So if you're starting a goat herd for a side hustle, a secondary income source, or just to add to your farm, you want to add quality animals. Now, not to say that every free goat is going to be a money pit, or is going to die on you, or is going to hurt your herd, but 9 times out of 10 that's going to be the case. Buy quality goats from reputable goat owners. Go to their setup, see how their goats look, the condition of the parents. If you're going to buy a buckling or a doeling, see the condition of the sire and the dam, and just see how they operate, how they have their pasture set up. If the goats look bad, then you probably want to avoid them. You're going to save yourself a massive headache in the future. So the fourth thing that you want to avoid is you want to avoid cheaping out on your fence. So when you fence in an area for your goats, the fence is going to be the highest upfront cost that you're going to face, and it is expensive. When I fenced in this area, this webbed wire, or welded wire I should say, right here, was $269 a roll. That was in 2019. Now it's close to $400 a roll, and it's not going to get any cheaper. So if I were you guys and I was going to start fencing in an area for your goats, do not cheap out. Don't get wire that's for a field fence wire for cows or horses. Horse wire would work, but the wire for cows, it's not going to work. What you need is the sheep and goat wire. Now it has 4-inch by 4-inch square panels, and that prevents the goats from getting their horns stuck in the fence. That prevents the baby goats from getting out of the fence through big holes. So when you go to Tractor Supply or Rural King or any farm store like that, the fence options that they have are going to be like a sheep and goat, a field fence, and that has larger holes, almost like a rectangle, and the goats will be able to get their heads stuck in that, their horns stuck in between those. Sometimes they'll get stuck in there. You won't see them if you don't check on your goats every single day, and the goat will die sometimes. I've have buddies that have goats, and some of their goats have died just from getting their head stuck in the fence. And also, if you have a bigger hole, when you have babies born, the babies can get out of the fence. Sometimes they don't know how to get back in, and then you've lost a baby goat just because you don't have the proper fence. It's going to be expensive. It's difficult to put up. If you don't know what you're doing, you can pay somebody to put it up, even more cost. But go on YouTube, look at how to set up a fence, how to put up fence. It's not as complicated as you might think, but get the right materials. It's another one of those things, if you put in a little bit of work on the front end, you just reap huge rewards on the back end. I've never had a goat escape from this. I've never had any of them get their head stuck in here. It's just very important to do it the right way. Also, we have electric on the top and on the inside of the fence, and in some cases we have electric on the outside at the bottom, so no coyotes, raccoons, bobcats, foxes try to dig under the fence. This top wire prevents them from climbing over, the bottom wire prevents them from digging under, and the inside wire prevents the goats from scratching themselves along the fence. If you do not have an inside electric wire, the goats will rub up and down the fence, bow it out, and shorten the lifespan of the fence. So it's important to set up a fence correctly. We're going to make a video showing how to do it in detail. Like I said, it's super easy. Me and my dad, we put this fence up ourselves over a course of a few Saturdays, and before you know it, it's finished, it's up, and it's going to last a really long time. So put in a little money, a little effort on the front end, and reap the rewards on the back end. the last thing you want to avoid when getting into goats is don't become too attached to your goats. Now, if you just are getting goats to have around your farm, your homestead, your backyard as pets, then that's one thing and that's perfectly fine. But if you're setting them up to be a secondary income, a side hustle, a business, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to get too attached to your goats individually, and most especially the babies when you come to sell them. When I first was getting into goats, every goat got a name. Me and my wife, we named them all. All the babies, they all got names. We were holding them, playing with them. When it came time to sell them, it was very difficult to let them go to their new owners, their new homes, especially if you have meat goats that people are going to be eating. So, you know, it's a little bit more difficult when you know that within a few days that goat's going to be on the table, and then rather than just living out the rest of their lives in a pen, having babies or breeding other goats if it's a male. So just keep that in mind. If you want it to be a business, just number them, tag them, interact with them. I'm not saying just ignore them or leave them alone, but just keep in mind how much attention and time you want to spend with each one, because you're going to develop a relationship with them, a bond with them, and when it comes time to get rid of them and sell them, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And if you decide to keep them, then we get back into mistake number one of overpopulation. So that's something to keep in mind. You can have a relationship with your goats. I mean, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you from personal experience. When you're super close and you're holding them and they come up to you and you're scratching their head, on that day that they have to go, it's a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, it's you, your farm, your setup. Do as you please. I'm just passing along a few tips that I've learned along the way that have helped me get my herd and my operation to where I have it now. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's anything that you can think of that I didn't mention, leave it in the comments below. I'm always up for learning new stuff. I'm by no means an expert on goats. I've had goats going on 4 or 5 years now, and it's definitely been a learning process. So we're trying to make this content to help you guys who are just coming along, to help avoid some of those mistakes that I made in the beginning. So if you like this content, drop us a like, drop us a sub, and we appreciate it, and we'll see you guys on the next video.